Hi, this is Georgina, part-time esoteric content creator and part-time Scarlet Woman, and you're watching the Dot Darling YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a TV series that's really Thelema's biggest media representation to date. There have been a couple things that have thelemic imagery in it or more subtle references, but to have a show that's blatantly about Thelema is really interesting and very exciting. This has been out for 2 years now. There are 2 seasons. I'm super late, but I didn't have a YouTube channel and I actually hadn't watched this show. The reason why I hadn't watched it, by the way, I didn't say this, I am a Thelemite. I'm an occultist. I've been practicing for quite a few years, and this is something that's very personal to me. Anyways, back to why I haven't watched it. So I never watched Strange Angel because I thought it would make me upset. I'm someone who is kind of like a nitpicker. I really do love cinema though, but I get really like caught up on those nitty-gritty details. And I thought that the show was going to be something that I would watch and not be able to stand. And especially since the subject of the show, Jack Parsons, which a background on Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was the founder of the Jet Propulsion Lab at NASA and one of the reasons why we even made it to the moon. America. But he was also a Thelemite occultist and part of the Agape Lodge. He made a lot of really interesting progressions in terms of understanding of Babylon, a kind of goddess who is very associated with Thelema. He met his Scarlet Woman, Marjorie Cameron, and they had a very interesting relationship. And he eventually died in a somewhat mysterious way. So there's a lot of really interesting history with Jack Parsons. His life is fascinating. He was polyamorous, a proto-feminist, and a real big impact on Thelema at the time. And still now, one of his big things that I think occultists will be very familiar with is this idea of the witchcraft, or the quote, "we are the witchcraft," which is kind of a movement he came up with very late in his life. But this show is very focused on the earlier parts of his life, when he's discovering Thelema and when he kind of goes from being a normie to being a Thelemite and developing the technology for NASA. Well, I mean, it wasn't NASA at the time. NASA didn't exist, but the Jet Propulsion Laboratory that became NASA. So anyways, I didn't watch this because I thought I was going to hate this. When you look up Thelema online and you Google it, pretty much everything that comes up is conspiracy theorist drivel or articles about how Aleister Crowley like murdered his entire family, and which that didn't happen. I'm just saying like it's that type of claims, which are very false. A lot of it can be easily debunked, and it just kind of grinds my gears. So I thought this show was going to be really sensationalized and was going to kind of go in that direction. But it really didn't. I was very pleasantly surprised by this. And now I'm going to break into why I feel the way I do, what things I kind of didn't like as much, and just why it's really not that bad and what this show kind of means for the Thelemic community. The first thing that really stuck out to me is the way that he finds Thelema. So the way that it is in the show is he moves next to this neighbor, and the neighbor is a huge Thelemite, super into it, and starts giving these like cryptic, super creepy horror movie style signs. Like they like nail a sign that says 93 to the door. They walk over and see this crazy ritual where there's a naked woman with a knife up to her neck, and it's very horror movie-esque. That's really not how Jack Parsons actually got into the occult. From what my research points to is he found a book on Thelema on his own and was interested in it, and then when he discovered Agape Lodge, he got a lot deeper into it. And but he was familiar with the occult prior to this situation. Also, they bring up early on about how Jack Parsons said he tried to summon the devil when he was a kid, and it brings up what would happen if the devil had actually appeared. In Jack Parsons' real life, he claims that he successfully summoned the devil as a child. He doesn't claim that it messed up, he claims that it actually happened. I think that tweak is really interesting to me because from a cinematic standpoint, it makes the story have more of an intrigue where you get this kind of like, will he be an occultist, will he not be an occultist thing going on that adds to the dramatic tension, but it does take away from the truthful historic narrative. Other than that, the majority of the history is pretty solid. Some of it I think they probably did write in just because like obviously it's a fiction show. and they wanted to sensationalize things. So that brings me to the big point that I think people who have a problem with this bring up a lot, and that's sensationalization. As I said earlier on in the video, the perception of Thelema from the outside is really not very positive. Aleister Crowley is depicted as like this wickedest man in the world because of some trolling he did with the press and kind of the way the Victorian attitude saw how radical Thelema was. So this show is kind of sensationalized. It's one of those sexed up period dramas, kind of like Mad Men. I think that's honestly just what the genre is. I don't think like too many people are going to be watching this show and assuming every single Thelemite lives like this. I do think certain things went a little far. There's a scene where it features the Gnostic Mass, and they've made the Gnostic Mass. I can't describe what they changed because YouTube would yell at me, and I already make content that YouTube, I feel like, wouldn't love. So I am not going to describe specifics, but essentially they make the Gnostic Mass significantly more intense and erotic than it already is. And this really annoyed some people on Twitter and whatnot. Personally, I kind of get it. I think that the original Gnostic Mass is edgy enough that they could have kept it, and they could have just used clips from it kind of in the more like erotic sections and still gotten the same effect. But I guess they were trying to get that shocking effect, so I really do kind of understand why they made that tweak. Additionally, some other rituals they kind of shifted around. At the beginning of season 2, they feature a scene that is essentially a takeoff of the Star Ruby, except she's holding an herb bundle and they're just walking around her. I don't like that switch. That one was kind of weird to me, but I mean, it's not horrible. Like, I feel like people are watching this show and they're not really expecting like accurate religious portrayal. Like, yeah, it's a glimpse into Thelema, but I don't really want to like hold it to this super high standard, right? Because all the rituals are shortened and all the rituals are sexed up throughout the entire show. Like that's a fact. But like they wanna get that impact. I feel like in every show that pictures witchcraft or the occultist happens. I think that also does lead to some misinformation, like people who come into the witchcraft community and assume you need to do blood magic for everything you do, right? Like yeah, it leads to that stuff, but I feel like this isn't atypical. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm not saying it's shocking either. I never watched one of these ritual tweaks and was like, I'm shocked that they did that. I can't believe they did that. Because it makes sense to me. Like, they're trying to get a good piece of television out, and they're gonna sex things up, they're gonna violence things up. That's just how, like, TV works. Like, you don't watch, like reality TV isn't reality, you know what I mean? No period drama is perfect. And so, I really don't take a huge issue with it. In general, they try to make the rituals less ceremonial than they are. They change up ritual wear quite a bit to be more like Hollywood occult aesthetics. I think a really interesting shift is that they have the Gnostic priestess in the center of the room rather than at the east side. I actually think that's visually cool. I don't know really why they felt the need to shift that besides for visual impact, but you know, nothing crazy. They have at one point, they feature cakes of light, which is a common staple in thelemic practice and ritualism. And they don't describe it, which I'm actually quite glad about. Let's not go there. There's already enough in this show. They don't need to go there. I think that's kind of cute. There were a lot of things that I could tell they did research on. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't perfect and it was all simplified or sexed up or with more traditional like spooky occult aesthetics. Like they carve in their skin at one point and they have like the crazy circles on the ground and whatnot. But like they don't have like the proper thelemic circles or whatever. I think only the really like films that really get that perfectly right would be Kenneth Anger, but he was like a full-on Thelemite. I don't think the writers of this show were Thelemites. It doesn't read to me like the writers of the show are Thelemites. I could see that there was a consultant or something. I don't know if there was a consultant, but like it did a good job, I would say. Like, not perfect. One thing that I found really interesting is the way it explored kind of the understanding and perception of Thelema from the people around Jack Parsons and how they reacted to it. I actually found this to be one of the most interesting parts of the show, more than the way the rituals were portrayed, because The general conception of Thelema is really pretty negative. I think one scene that really sticks out to me is when his wife hears about this and looks up Aleister Crowley at the library and sees these headlines about him being the wickedest man in the world, him doing these really erotic, crazy rituals, using tons of drugs, being bisexual, etc., and her being just shocked. Because I think that's an experience a lot of Thelemites have experienced. Someone they know has kind of bought into this. I meant and explored how Thelemites see it as propaganda and how Thelemites are like, this is false, and kind of like correcting that. I found that really interesting. Also, a thing that it explores and it shows is the use of drug use in ritual practice and in magical practice, and kind of like how that's debated. I find it really interesting how they go into this plot point where one of the practitioners' lodge is using drugs to bring about his gnosis and his contact with his HGA, and the priest, who's kind of the head of the lodge, they call him the magus in the show, like really questions it and is questioning his attainment and really going like, is that accurate? Which, I mean, drug use in the occult is a hotly debated topic in the in-person and online occult communities. So I found it really cool that they kind of dived into that controversial issue rather than painting Thelema with a broad stroke as a bunch of people using sexual and drug-based practices to reach enlightenment. I think it was really cool that they showed that not all the Thelemites agreed with each other and that there was discourse within the Thelemic community, because any Thelemite watching this video, trust me, we argue all the time. I feel like Thelemites are too busy arguing with each other on what Thelema is than doing rituals sometimes. Like, go on a forum or a Discord server or Twitter and you see people like going at it all the time. So I think it's kind of cool that they showed that Thelema is not a monolith. Also, I really liked how they explored a plot about kind of Thelema and religious freedom and how Thelema was not really considered a religion. I think it's just really interesting that it explored and dived into actual Thelemic topics. I could really see that there's a lot of care put into this and not just like, I don't know, some sensationalized, because it's so easy that they could have gone that direction. It would have probably done great if they went this super edgy horror movie direction, but they didn't. They did a little at the beginning, but as the show gets on, it really evolves and matures and becomes something more than this, like, sexy period drama. It really does, like, as the plot moves, really improve. In terms of Thelemic philosophy, I think it explores it very well. I think you could watch the show and get a grasp of what Thelemites believe pretty quickly. Once again, I'm not really a fan of the beginning of the show. I think the beginning of the show has some issues, and that's where you get this kind of horror movie feeling and a lot of the sensationalized sexed up elements. But the show really does mature and grow into itself. It really does become something that you really connect to on the Thelemic side and become something that I think a practitioner would watch and go, yeah, this is what I do. I'm not ashamed that this is representing me. Now, I will say one thing that I didn't like as much is I don't really get why they picked this part of Jack Parsons' life. I think the most interesting part of the Parsons story is later on when he's on kind of his journey and connecting with Babylon and Marjorie Cameron. I found it a very interesting choice to pick so early on in his life. It makes me wonder if they were trying to get more seasons than they got or had a larger plan in store, because I feel like it really only touches the surface. And for what this means as a Thelemite, and through the community and what kind of this media representation does for us, I think that this isn't really negative. I wouldn't say it's explicitly positive, because as we know, modern Thelema is a lot tamer than what's happening in the show. The show's sexed up. Like, that's just a good word for it. Like, you know, they have a lot of sex in it. Like, that's just what the show is. That's fine. But I mean, I think it portrays Thelema as a little simplified and a little kind of edgier than it actually is. But I don't think it does damage to us. I don't think it really makes people go, oh no, Thelema is evil. I think it actually kind of clears misconceptions in a lot of ways. I don't think this show's gonna result in people becoming Thelemites. I don't really think it's like a good like recruitment pitch. I don't think we should be like, this is gonna make me into Thelema. I don't think this is gonna boost membership in Thelemic groups or orders. I think it's more neutral. I think I don't think you're gonna watch the show and really kind of become an occultist like you see with shows like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina or AHS Coven really boosting the membership of those communities. But my final thoughts on this are that It's simplified ritualism, it's sexed up, but overall, I mean, it gets the core of it right. The story is very historically accurate. It portrays Thelema in a light that clears a lot of misconceptions. There's definitely some weirdness thrown in there and some inaccuracy. I've never heard of people doing what they called purge sessions, which is essentially like the equivalent of Catholic confession. I think that was definitely a narrative device rather than like part of the story. But like, it's not bad. It's really not bad. I was very pleasantly surprised. I would say watch it. I think like filmmaking wise, it's pretty good. Like the cinematography is strong, the costuming is very historically accurate, and it's overall pretty well researched. Do I think it's perfect? No. It's not damaging, you know? Like, I was really expecting it to be kind of damaging to the community. But in reality, like, it's pretty good. So that's my take on Strange Angel. I think it's kind of just in the middle, not really bad or good. I'm just relieved that it's not a shit show, honestly. I was kind of expecting that. So anyways, this has been the Darling YouTube channel. Like, comment, subscribe, and if you're subscribed for exactly 93 days, you will meet your holy guardian angel, and you can hold me to that.